Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our second annual board meeting. We're super excited to share our ideas for how to overcome the 737 MAX crisis. For those of you we haven't met yet, my name is Eric Sun. I'm joined by my partner, Catherine Chang.
Over the past couple of weeks, we have analyzed the situation from multiple angles and identified 6 groups of stakeholders. As we discuss our solution today, we encourage you to keep the incentive structures of these stakeholders in mind. Specifically, we have an ethical obligation to the passengers and the crew that operated our planes and ultimately passed away in these crashes, the airlines that have suffered economic damages, the regulators who have lost trust and faith in our systems, and lastly, the shareholders and employees that have been with us since day one, always supporting us. Additionally, Eric and I have also taken the initiative to immerse ourselves in Boeing's company culture. After talking with employees, we have deduced that our commitment is heartfelt and genuine when it comes to connecting, exploring, protecting, and inspiring the world through aerospace innovation. Unfortunately, a series of misguided decisions has led us astray from 6 out of 7 of our core values. Therefore, in order to regain our position as the world's leader in global aviation safety and innovation, we'll be answering 3 questions. First, from an ethical perspective, how do we regain and establish strong engineering culture and ethics so that we can prioritize safety in our decision-making? Additionally, from a legal perspective, how do we approach compliance with regulation while regaining the trust of regulatory agents as well as the government and investors? And lastly, from an economic perspective, how do we balance the need for speed and cost-cutting in a competitive duopoly while maintaining our commitment to ethical excellence?
To begin, we need to establish a strong ethical foundation for which our legal and economic strategy can follow. We've divided this up into 3 different components. First, we believe we need to address victim compensation in a more meaningful and genuine manner. Second, in order to address ethical fading, we need to include a new code of ethics. And finally, to address the problem of employee heteronomy, we have a number of employee enablement strategies.
To begin, we acknowledge the fact that our current monetary compensation structure has fallen in terms of impact and meaningfulness. Victims' families have indicated they feel that these monetary payouts are more for the cameras and public relations than for the families themselves. Specifically, there is a psychological impact that whenever you place money on a victim's life, ultimately you come off as uncaring and corporate. Therefore, instead, we ask ourselves to embrace meaningful redress. Our apology should be genuine, intimate, and sympathetic. Specifically, we might suggest writing personal letters from company executives to these families to show that we care about them in a real and authentic way. Additionally, we should set up one-on-one meetings with each individual's families to better understand them and put names and faces to the victims that passed in the crashes. And lastly, to the best of our ability and within reason, we should support them from a legal, financial, and mental health perspective so that we can truly regain the trust of our passengers and crew members and move forward.
Having helped our victims move forward in an ethical way, we also look towards the future. How do we create a code of ethics that really encompasses and helps Boeing move forward? And I think there's 3 key principles that we took from engineering ethics. The first is the first fundamental canon of engineering ethics, and that is holding paramount the welfare, safety, and health of the public. Second is the concept of informed consent. By helping pilots understand what they're getting themselves into, they can better manage and better address emergencies that come up. And finally, the precautionary principle. If we can implement 2 safety features that cost us almost nothing, then we should do it.
Having moved forward ethically as a whole company, we now need to address the problem of employee heteronomy, or the idea that employees don't feel enabled to stand up for their own personal ethical beliefs. Specifically, in the case of the 737 MAX, we actually had engineers within the company that chose to stand up and say, there needs to be more sensors on this plane, we need to run more tests, yet they were shot down by upper management. To reverse this trend, we should enable our employees to act through 3 different methodologies. First, we should establish a joint hotline with the FAA so that ultimately you can report to the company as a whole if you feel like your individual manager isn't being responsive. Second, our executive team needs to manage our personal image in terms of validating the concerns of employees and addressing them even if we don't think there needs to be action taken. And lastly, there needs to be bottom-up reviews in a company as big as Boeing, especially to hold our managers in the middle market accountable for the actions so that ultimately they will be more sensitive to employee concerns and empower these 45,000 employees across all segments of Boeing to act and stand up for their personal ethical beliefs.
Having developed a strong ethical foundation, we then can layer on a legal strategy. And having Boeing operate 10,000 planes in numerous fleets across the country, our first priority should be control and quality. To do that, we recommend enforcing stronger checks and balances through 2 methods. First is more regulatory oversight, and second is more board oversight.
Starting first from the external perspective, one of the key failures in the 737 MAX was the fact that the FAA outsourced the majority of testing to Boeing. This is due to limitations in government personnel as well as resources. Additionally, upper management of the FAA began to treat Boeing more as a client rather than as a body to regulate. Of course, us as a corporation do not make things easy for this regulatory body. We chose to keep them in the dark regarding the MCAS and other support systems and the significance of MCAS. Additionally, we convinced them to erase any mention of MCAS from technical specifications. Additionally, due to recent changes in legislation, we were able to cherry pick the individuals that will communicate and work with the FAA. This joint failure on both FAA and Boeing's part ultimately led to reputational damage that we now have to remedy through structural changes. Specifically, let's start at the bottom. By showing initiative and investment, we can convince regulators and other global aviation industries around the world that we are committed to ethical safety standards. Specifically, we will create safety assessment teams combined with both junior and senior engineers so that we can draw from a wider breadth of engineering expertise and bring a fresh, different perspectives from an ethical perspective. Then we will motivate these safety assessment teams to take ethical initiatives and take into control the quality of the plane that they are designing by motivating them through public acknowledgement of all valid concerns of people who are willing to stand up for them, and also implementing safety and quality concerns into performance pay indicators. And most importantly, we will integrate our relationship with the FAA by being more transparent about our communications for the technical specifications of our plane. By communicating more frequently with regulators and also bringing them on earlier in the process, we can avoid the temptation to brush things like MCAS under the rug and fear costly last-minute changes.
Taking a look inwards, we must also look at where our internal controls could have gone awry. Looking at the board in front of us, we see a room full of talent, experience, and expertise. But a great board never rests on its laurels. It always moves forward to be better, and Catherine and I have identified 3 major shareholder concerns that we can move forward on. First is the implementation of a safety committee. This will offer more safety oversight initiatives, and this will be a task force made up of experienced engineers and managers with technical expertise that can conduct audits and establish safety guidelines through all departments. Second is implementation of more shareholder transparency. By using a third-party search firm, we can offer more transparency to our shareholders that we're an independent board. And finally, by enforcing external controls as an executive management as the board, we send a message from the top down that Boeing truly cares about our legal strategy.
Of course, no proposal solution is complete without examination of the economic circumstance under which the MCAS was approved. Specifically, we operate in a competitive duopoly with Airbus, constantly being pressured to gain market share and release products even if they're not ready for the market. Therefore, all ethical and legal recommendations are not viable unless they are operable from an economic perspective. As a result, we're choosing to make our processes more efficient so that we can make room for these considerations. We'll tackle 2 aspects of business management: design and evaluation. First, from design. Instead of being reactive to the market, we aim for you to integrate our design processes so that we can embrace agile innovation. Second, we'll embrace and reject the anti-human mindset by, instead of focusing on purely economic measures, embracing lifecycle engineering.
Starting off with integrated design thinking, it's an engineering philosophy that really puts the customer first. In terms of the 737 MAX, we realized we failed on the product innovation trifecta on 2 fronts. First, desirability. We underestimated the market's need for more narrow-body planes. By working more closely with our key customers, the airlines, we're able to better forecast market demand and ultimately beat our competitors to the chase. In terms of viability, taking a look at the MCAS system itself, we realized that we gave too little training for our pilots and expected them to act reasonably in 4 seconds for any MCAS alerts. By working more closely with these pilots and flight attendants, we can ultimately create a product that they desire and they want to fly.
Having addressed design, we now move on to evaluation. How do we determine if design is actually attractive and should be implemented and pursued? Rather than focus on profit maximization, which study after study shows leads to inferior financial results, we suggest lifecycle engineering. It challenges managers to break apart each phase of the product's lifecycle into things like development, production, operations, and disposal, and then ask questions about not just economic impacts of design choices, but also reputational ones, ecological ones, and social economic ones. Ultimately, by pursuing these goals in conjunction with our economic goals, we can introduce substantial efficiencies in the system and ultimately combine economic goals with corporate social responsibility, leading to the trifecta of profit, people, and planet.
Catherine and I truly believe that Boeing and this board can emerge from this crisis more successful than ever. With a new ethical framework, a legal strategy, and economic design thinking, we can offer uncompromising ethical, legal, and safety standards without compromising profit. Thank you, and we're open for questions.
Okay, we're going to move into our Q&A session now. I'm going to have Mr. Russ Johnson, who's the chair of our Center for Leadership Ethics Board. That's the question.
On the screen is one of Boeing's enduring values, safety. We value human life and well-being above all else and take action accordingly. We are personally responsible and collectively accountable for safety at all levels, for our teammates, our passengers, and those who service our products. Boeing's corporate culture has been cited as root cause of the MAX 737 crisis and for not adhering to Boeing's values. Why? And identify three changes that could be implemented by leadership at Boeing to bolster an ethical corporate culture.
So we'll answer the first part of this question by reminding you that there are engineers within our company that have strong ethical standards. Yet, when they requested for more testing on air safety control systems, as well as more sensors on the Boeing plane, their response from upper management was, "That's a great concern, we're glad you pointed it out, but we have timetables to meet, and we need to care about the cost basis of our planes." These employees were ultimately dejected, and now there is a rise of hostility within our corporate culture that ultimately indicates there is a fear of retaliation. Despite filing many internal ethical complaints, these voices of these employees have been stifled. As a result, we can see that this is one of the key indicators of why the Boeing 737 crisis occurred. Had those voices and complaints been heard, experts indicate those crashes might not have occurred. As a result, we return to the second part of this question. How do we implement changes so that this will never occur in the future? Let's start with executive management. Executive management has the ability to lead this company in the right direction if they're able to empower employees. Eric and I discussed earlier our engagement with employees indicates that currently they feel like safety isn't the highest standard. If the executive management can come out and incentivize upper management with bottom-up reviews of their ethical and their safety commitments, we're able to incentivize both from a monetary perspective as well as from a public relations perspective and a public recognition perspective, the defendants, essentially defending quality and safety in our evaluation process rather than just focusing on economics. Second, the board itself can also take a more active role. Something we suggest doing is establishing a commitment of safety that essentially will bring in more technical experts to help us keep management accountable. Every single person in the board that is sitting in this room today brings something different to the table. But the one part we're lacking is our inability to understand the intricacies of plane design. We don't expect the board to all become engineers. Rather, we just need to have an advisory board that will help the board understand and hold executive management accountable. If there is no one who is providing internal oversight to the executive management team, they can repeat what they did this time, where essentially they overrode the board and certified the Boeing 737 MAX and didn't even inform us of impasse until a month after the crisis actually occurred. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, we think we should shift our cultural mindset from short-termism to long-termism. Economic myopia is a real crisis in businesses today, where essentially we are always prioritizing profit maximization while deprioritizing things like people and planet. Study after study shows that this leads to horrible corporate culture, where ultimately employees feel that there isn't a long-term vision that we can strive towards. Even though we truly believe that we are invested in Boeing's mission to explore, protect, inspire, and ultimately protect the world through aerospace engineering, unless we can shift more from that short-term to that long-term strategy and align ourselves with long-term investors such as Vanguard and T. Rowe, rather than active hedge fund managers who are constantly pressuring us from an earnings perspective, we'll never be able to reach that high quality of being the global